Hey everyone, Meet Kevin here. Welcome back to another Meet Kevin Show interview. Today we're going to be interviewing somebody super exciting. I have never talked to a CEO in the cannabis industry before, and I'm jumping up and down about the opportunity on the inside because I have so many questions. This is an industry that we know is ready for disruption, ready for legalization, broad-based legalization, and I have so many questions because there are some amazing opportunities. There's some amazing companies that are just buried without public awareness or attention. And GTEC might be one of those that we want to learn about because I think they're here to stay. Let's talk to the CEO of GTEC Holdings, Norton Singhavon. Welcome aboard.
Hey, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. So tell me a little bit. I mean, first, when people hear, cannabis company, there's a lot of skepticism. We're not legal in all places. In the United States, you can't even, have a legitimate banking operation. Tell me a little bit. Where are you all located? Does where you're located help you in this? And how do you get out there?
Yeah, so we're located in a place called Kelowna, BC. It's essentially like the Napa Valley of I say the West Coast Canada. It's about probably like 300 miles outside of Vancouver. So that's where our head office is. It's where our operations are based out of in terms of the corporate side of things. But we do have cultivation facilities in BC, one in Chase, which is about an hour and a half from Kelowna. We have one, the 3PL joint venture, which we don't really talk about that much, but I think people don't realize how big it's going to be. So we finished construction on the facility, 60,000 square feet. To give you some perspective, currently today, we are licensed and operational on about 40,000 square feet of facility. So we're going to go from 40,000 to 100,000 square feet. There's a 2.5 times. However, on that facility, we are a 50% partner. But we submitted for licensing on that, I believe it was 3 Fridays ago. So that's Vernon's like half an hour outside of Kelowna. Then we have a facility, which is our first licensed facility in Edmonton, Alberta. This is the only facility that we didn't build. We bought this with a license on the door, and I'll kind of get to that, why we did that after. And then our final facility is Grey Bruce Farms out of Kincardine, Ontario, which is another one that we built from the ground up. So we bought the Alberta one late 2017, closed on it 2018. It was not built to our specs and standards. However, at the time, all we had was a couple facilities in construction in licensing. So we did this to expedite our speed to market. If you dove into our financials, we had an impairment charge on that recently, but allowed us to get the provincial listings. If you tried to get provincial listings now, it is not that easy. Try going to Ontario, the largest provincial market in Canada, and saying, hey, we grow great craft cannabis. They'll be like, yeah. So what? So does 50 other people calling me today, right? So I think, Alberta really expedited our speed to market and allowed us to get our brands to market a lot faster than doing it with our existing facilities. So that's kind of the lay of the land in terms of where we're located and where our facilities are based out of.
Is that the biggest constraint in cannabis, is having square footage and really just grow operation?
No, I think actually that is probably the biggest downfall to 99% of the companies. So what happened is, not to throw certain companies under the bus, but some companies went out with millions of square foot of greenhouse. And I saw that as a complete failing strategy. So just a little bit of background. I've been investing and dabbling in US cannabis since probably about 2015. Now everyone calls it NSOs. I mean, I was doing multi-state operations before the term MSO was even coined by retail investors. So yeah, very familiar with the US trends, to the point where when I saw what was happening in Canada, where guys were doing the big greenhouses, I'm like, this has never worked in Colorado. It hasn't worked in California, Washington, Oregon. And these are states where I had involvement in and investments, some passive, some active. So I at this point, I really thought, it's time to do something in Canada. It's home court. I think we can come up with a strategy that's going to be a winning strategy. And it's not about, first to market. It's not about biggest market. It's about essentially doing, what the winners were doing in the States. What I saw was a common theme. I go into Colorado, I said, who's your top selling product? Who's the highest priced product? I want to meet these guys.
Yeah.
Most of the time I actually got an intro. I literally walked in, I just said, I'm from Canada. I don't know anybody out here. I want to meet some industry contacts. Whether it's for investment, strategic partnerships, I want to meet the who's who. I literally went into every single relatively known dispensary chain in Colorado. That's where I started. I'd say almost like 9 of 10 dispensaries I went into, I got an email, I got an intro to kind of who their equivalent of black market or GTEC was. And they're all purpose-built indoor facilities, high THC cultivars, unique strains, Cali-style genetics. These were the guys that were winning. Don't get me wrong, there was greenhouse guys that were successful, but to a certain degree, like that was used for edibles, inputs, extracts, right? But I was talking to own that flower category, to be, that Grey Goose and Hennessy equivalent. Like, who are the guys that are winning and getting $25 a gram, in these states? And it was all purpose-built indoor. So took that, decided to let's do this strategy in Canada. And to date, we've been very methodical and disciplined about how we go about things. It's not all bigger isn't always better.
Okay, so unpackaging that a little bit, it sounds like, and forgive me if what I'm saying sounds simple. I want to make sure everybody can understand as well.
Yeah,
it sounds like what you're saying is you really went out of your way to try to understand how can you have a high margin, highly profitable product, and then scale that slowly to where maybe you're not getting buried in like $1 million or $1 million square foot factory, or just cultivation greenhouse. So I mean, what are you doing that's different? I mean, don't you have a greenhouse as well? If I go in there, isn't it going to be, humid with plants growing too?
No, when I say greenhouse, like they're literally greenhouses that are designed to grow produce like tomatoes and vegetables, right? So, glass enclosure. What we're doing, so to simplify things, there's basically 3 methods of cultivation. There's outdoor, there's greenhouse, and then there's indoor. So we're the belief, now some people will probably debate on this, but it is of my belief that to get the high gross margin, you got to go indoor, purpose-built indoor facilities, control your environment down to a T.
And is that more difficult in Canada where it can be cold, or you just turn the heaters on and you're good kind of thing?
If you're purpose-built indoor, it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Like you build your own environment, you build your own climate. I mean, there are things to consider. So in a place like Kelowna, where the humidity is quite dry, you're going to want to add humidification to your HVAC systems, right? Now, I came from Vancouver, which is a very humid place. And when we first were in Kelowna, our HVAC guys said, you're going to have to add humidity. We're like, yeah, whatever. You know nothing about growing, buddy. Needless to say, he was completely right. So other than little things like that, it honestly doesn't matter where you are in the world. And obviously, if you're somewhere where it's extremely hot, then you have to have your ACs to have enough tonnage to cool the place down.
Absolutely. Okay. So purpose built and really selecting your strains is kind of a way that you're trying to differentiate your product. To have something higher margin, though, you have to have that customer base and be able to market it. How do you market this? I mean, you mentioned yourself that you're like in the Napa Valley of cannabis. To me, that sounds like there are hundreds of y'all out there.
Yeah, so I mean, we're actually in the Napa Valley of wine, and by fluke chance, it actually I'd say is a pretty good hub for cannabis. So to give you some perspective, there's about I think 8, probably close to 10 licensed producers now, in a vicinity of about 500,000 people. So that's pretty big. That's the highest per capita I can think of. But yeah, to touch on it, it's not just about the facilities, not just about the genetics. That's it's a part of the equation. It's still the post-processing, the post-harvest side. So we whole plant hang dry everything. We hand trim everything. We hand package everything. Everything gets packaged, gets visually inspected before we put a lid on it, put a seal on it. Like there's somebody that actually analyzes it. A lot of licensed producers, what they do is automate their packaging, and we've looked at automation, but there hasn't been a machine that can handle the product and give us the specifications that we want. So for example, when we talk to companies that do automated packaging, I tell them, listen, in my 3.5 gram 8th jar, I might help them work. Yeah. So in one of these jars, we have a strict standard. This is our core SKU, a 3.5 gram eighth. So, I want one nug the size of a thumb. That's kind of your main showmanship nug. And then maybe 2 or 3 a little bit smaller. And then maybe a couple, what I call popcorns, no more than seven nugs in a jar. There isn't a machine that can do that. And what we do results in a slightly higher cost of production. But it's not even that crazy. Like, our cash cost of production, including packaging, give or take, should be about $2.25 per gram. 75 cents of that is actually the glass jar, the label, the seal, and the labor intensive process, right? But at 225 with the amount of gross margins that we have, like, our average rec selling price, I think at our financials, I think was $8.60 or something like that, including excise tax. Excise tax is $1 a gram. So you pull that out, we're still averaging, call it $7.60 in our jeans after paying the government their $1 tax off of a roughly $2.25 cash costs of production. So there's still room for price compression. If the prices drop to $4.50, we still have 50% gross margin.
Yeah, I'm looking at your financials right now, and it does look like salaries and wages are one of your biggest expenses. Around 1.7 million, I believe, Canadian dollars here. I'm sure you're reporting in Canadian dollars. 1.7 million out of 8.8 in revenue. I mean, you're spending twice on salaries and wages what you're paying in taxes. So I could see the desire to maybe automate a little bit, because that's a big chunk.
Well, actually, automation would go into our cost of production. So it goes into our cost of goods sold.
Okay.
So in terms of salaries and wages, that's predominantly the parent company or head of marketing, sales, chief financial officer. Being a publicly traded company, like, it's the finance and accounting team is something that actually surprised me before running a publicly traded company. I was like, oh, we can have one accountant on the team. Like, good luck. 3 facilities, publicly traded, IFRS reporting. So long story short, that's all gone to the corporate side of things.
So you've got 1.7 million going for corporate salaries and wages, but how much then of your COGS, your cost of goods sold, is going to salaries? You get about, in 2020 here, you've got about 3.9. How much of that do you think is going to salaries? Like half of it?
Yeah, so probably about that. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. In terms of our cultivation facilities, like, they all run independently, and recently they were all licensed to package all for themselves. So before we had Alberta packaging everything for the other 3 facilities. Now all 3 facilities can package for themselves. So I do expect our costs to go up a little bit in the short term, as I expect some overlap, right? Alberta is still, staffed up to package for all the other facilities. As the other facilities come online to package for themselves, there's going to be a little bit of overlap, but we're constantly driving down our costs, right? You look at, what do we slash our operational costs down by, like 40% over the last year?
Let's see. Operating expenses, 5.8, and in 2019 you were sitting at 9.6. Looks like you had a would you have a big decrease in here? Yeah, so actually a decrease in, $1 million came off share-based payments, and then you had some salaries and wages that actually declined a bit too. Admin like halved. Yeah. Oh, and you had consulting fees back in 19 that you don't now.
Yeah, because as we were ramping up production with our facilities getting licensed, we brought in consultants just to, get things moving, get things done quickly, right? I didn't want to have any sort of delays. So we knew we'd be throwing money at it, but we knew that we'd be getting that in return by getting our facilities operational quickly.
Gotcha. So really, is the hand picking something that also helps market the product? Do the customers like that?
Yes, it's definitely an angle, not even an angle because it's the truth, but definitely it's a way to promote the product. So what we're seeing in Ontario is moving to a craft designation, where actually it is hang dry, hand trimmed, and hand packaged. So there's actually, going to be a designation, a category for that in the largest provincial market in the country.
Gotcha. This, the genetics and that, like, how do you even come upon this? Do you just keep trying out different variants until you find one that grows the way you like? I mean, how much R&D goes into this?
We've been fortunate enough where we made a deal with a local guy. He's a breeder. He's involved in genetics. Like he's the guy that does all of this R&D for us. We made a deal with him where we gave him, I think it was, it was a couple million shares, but held over escrow milestones. So he brings us genetics. We run them. If we sell them, if it turns into sellable product, after let's say like I don't remember the tiers of the milestones, but let's say it's 1,500 kg of product sold, so 1.5 million grams sold. He gets 1/8 of the stock released. So basically, he's incentivized to constantly innovate and bring us product because we've issued him shares. It's sitting in trust, and he can't get them until we sell a certain volume of product from genetics that he's brought to the table. So it's no cash. It's no cash out the pocket. We gave him some stock, and he's constantly doing all this stuff, and bringing us new strains. So how it works in Canada is when you get a new license, Health Canada allows you one time to bring in whatever genetics you like. So the problem is that most licensed producers are just growing the same stocks, Sensei Star, WAPA, Blue Dream, you name it, and they're buying these genetics off each other, and there's no competitive advantage to the market. Now, a lot of these smaller, what they're called, the classification for the license is actually called micro licenses. A lot of these micro licenses now are starting to bring in genetics because they're taking advantage of that one-time statutory declaration that Health Canada allows you to have. So we're seeing some pretty cool products come to market. What gives me comfort is that most of these guys with competing products, they're not large-scale producers. They are micro producers, which they're allowed to produce 600 kilos a year approximately.
And that's a limitation that you have as well. But I mean, that seems like a very high limit.
No, we don't have any limitations with a standard So a micro cultivation license, you're limited based on square footage. You're allowed to have 2,150 square foot of canopy. We are standard cultivation licenses with no limitations.
Got it. Okay. So I mean, what's going to stop this from becoming like, similar to, let's say, the airline industry, where you've got, a few big names that just run everything? I mean, even in America, you've got some of these big companies. What gives all of the smaller companies an edge here, and how many are there? I mean, it seems like there are a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I tracked it the other day. There's 320 standard cultivation licenses issued in the country. In terms of like publicly traded, now some of those are multiple licenses, right? Like for example, we hold 3 of those 320. So, I think in terms of publicly traded cannabis companies, I haven't tallied in a while. If I were to guess, there's probably about 50 of them. So, airlines might not be the best comparison, but I'll use, wine and spirits or alcohol. You have the Anheuser-Busch's of the world, you have the Diageo's of the world. But what we're seeing in the last decade is, you look at, and maybe these are not the best examples, but I'm going to say Aviation Gin and Casamigos, right? Like,
okay, the Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, like I bet you when let's say Ryan Reynolds went out to launch Aviation Gin, assuming he didn't have to raise money, but let's say hypothetically, if he had to raise money, I bet you tons of investors, bankers, and analysts would have told him, "You're late to the race. The big guys run the show. Good luck. Right. You're not going to market share." But you're also seeing that in craft beer. So, there's a lot of craft beer out there that's taking market share. So I think what's happening is, the demographic of consumers is starting to root for the small independents on certain things. And I think, grocery is one of them. I try and buy, produce from a local company. Would I go to a small mom and pop company if I'm buying a vehicle? Probably not. A cell phone? Sure. No. But wine and spirits, produce, consumer packaged goods, I think, the world, the retail demographic is starting to really like to support this independence, because it's all about craft, right? Craft beer, the smaller winery, they don't want to be, buying Budweiser beer all the time. And I think we're gonna see that in Canada. So don't get me wrong. There's gonna be the conglomerates like there is in every single category, but consumer trends. If I'm the guy that's gonna go walk into a dispensary in California and spend $20 a gram on flower, do I want to buy it from someone who's like the Walmart of cannabis? Probably not. I'm going to go with something, and it's something unique, something that's going to give me the feeling of like craft and exclusivity, whether that's actually the case or not. It's delivering that result and perception to the consumer.
Ah, God. So, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, we've got craft beers. I think that's such a great analogy, but that's also a legal industry in federally. How do y'all handle that in the United, certainly if you're distributing to the United States, how does that all work with all this interchange of laws? And do you expect any kind of change anytime soon?
Well, right now we're in Canada only.
Okay.
We're not allowed to have any sort of thing that touches the plant in the US. And that's because we're listed on the TSX Venture. So TSX Venture corporate finance policy does not allow issuers to engage in activities essentially that are touching the plant in the US. So we're hard stopped there. If you're listed on the Canadian Securities Exchange, which is where the MSOs are listed, you can. Yeah. With that said, I'd say, if regulations change to allow us to, enter into the US, I'm not saying that we would, because there has to be a business case, right? So I'm going to analyze, certain markets, but I'm going to explore the idea, and if it makes business sense to enter, if we feel we have a competitive advantage, then yeah, we definitely would consider it. But if I were to peg a timeline, I'm not the guy to peg the timeline. However, I know some people that are a lot smarter than me that have a lot more money in the US MSOs. And they're confident with the Biden administration. They think within the next 2 years, we will receive some sort of, either it's federal legalization or some sort of act that will, or reclassification that will allow basically companies to play ball at a federal level.
Nice. Okay. So, there's maybe you've heard of this company, Planet 13. They've got like a Vegas operation. They kind of make it this almost like it's almost like walk into a store when you're in Disneyland. They got all of these products laid out in showcases. Almost feels a little bit like a jewelry store / theme park. How does something like that, that strategy compare to what you all are doing? I mean, you're in Canada. I realize they are also listed in Canada, but they took the strategy where they can sell in the US. How important is this retail experience to get your product out there?
So we're in two different categories. Like Planet 13, to use the alcohol comparison, is essentially a behemoth liquor store. Like you walk into, they're a behemoth liquor store that's also captured a little bit of the tourism side of things, right? So that's a great model, and you need businesses like that if you're me. But what I am is I'm the guy who produces the craft beer that goes onto the shelves. So I don't own any stores. I don't open retail stores. I produce products that would go onto shelves of retail stores in Canada. Now, with Planet 13, obviously being in the US, we're not able to enter into the US at this point. Planet 13 obviously doesn't have any stores in Canada. To look at comparison, there are other retailers in Canada that are fairly large scale. But I don't think anyone's done what Planet 13 has, which is what I call just that behemoth flagship store, like Lululemon Times Square. That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, that is interesting. So they, I believe they have their own strains as well that they grow, but you're saying that they could essentially also then partner with other craft producers and showcase that sort of product.
Correct. I've never walked into a Planet 13 store. Some of the guys on my team have. My understanding is that they don't just carry their own product. They may have. Now, I don't know how far in depth it goes. Like if they carry their own branded products, are they cultivating that themselves, or is it white label? Are they contract manufacturing with another grower and saying, hey, you have great flower, put it in Planet 13, packaging in jars so we can put it on our shelves? Yeah, it's like Costco has Kirkland, right? That's their white label brand. And I'm wondering if, I don't know enough about Planet 13 to know if they cultivate that themselves. If I were them, I'd probably just look at white labeling, because setting up facilities and managing it is not an easy task. You want to focus on where you can win. So they're winning in the retail category, focus on that. We're winning in the cultivation category, we focus on that.
Gotcha. So how do you distribute then? Do you sell your product to wholesalers, or how does this work?
So for rec, I'll go through rec first. So for this, to get into the retail dispensaries in Canada, it varies province by province. Now, in 4 of the major provinces, which is BC, Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec, you essentially have to go through their liquor board. Cannabis is controlled exactly like how liquor is, meaning you sell to the government directly. They're the buyer of your product. They then will mark it up, their percentage, which is anywhere from 15 to 25%, and then the retail stores must purchase it from the government distribution system. There are some smaller provinces that are operating not through the government supply chain model, where you can ship direct to the stores. Each model has its pros and cons. I thought being able to ship directly to stores was a great model until you realize with the government, you can ship $1 million of product to their warehouse, one shot, one go. And then you have to go DSD, which is direct to store. And then if you have to ship out $1 million of product to 50 stores, it's not an easy task. That's number one. Number two, when you have the government as the middleman, they control the pricing. They buy it. The retailer has to pay the government markup. That's that. They can't come to me and say, Norton, I want your product cheaper than everyone else, because I'm saying, sorry, you have to buy from the Ontario government. I can't do anything about that. In the provinces where you don't have the government, you're finding certain retailers are behaving a little bit like the mafia or the bullies. They're saying, well, if you want product on my shelves, you got to pay me, X amount per SKU. And then you have to use my distribution company, and I'm going to charge you 25% distribution. And then you can't sell product to my competitors. And then you get other people that say, well, we're not going to buy your product if we have to buy it from, XYZ's distribution company, where there are competitors. So I literally just had this conversation with a guy on Twitter, 30 minutes before our call. He made a post about, he wishes provinces would follow in the footsteps of Saskatchewan. And I didn't comment publicly. I messaged him directly. I said, not all that glitters is gold, my friend. I'm playing in all provinces, and Saskatchewan has its pros and cons. So that's how the distribution works on the rec side. On the wholesale side, we can sell product to any other licensed producer in the country. So another holder of a license, we can sell them product, whether doesn't matter what they're going to do with it. We'll sell them flour. It's not packaged like this. It's large format, like Ziploc bags essentially. And they can either put it into their own rec brands. They can extract it. They can export it. They can do whatever the heck they want. Once it arrives in their facility under their license, really it's up to them what they want to do with the product.
This rec model, which is where you're sending it essentially to the government, is this kind of? I've been to Canada a couple times. Forgive me, I'm not so familiar. I know there's like an LCBO. I think that's where you buy the alcohol, and it's like here in America, you go into a grocery store and there's alcohol. There, you got to leave the grocery store, go into like the LCBO, which is oftentimes close by, but I think that's government run. Is that kind of the way it is with marijuana?
So in Ontario, they originally were going to open their own store. So I should have clarified. So in all those 4 major provinces, other than Quebec, so BC, Alberta, and Ontario, the government, they do not run their own brick and mortar stores. However, they do have a monopoly on the online e-commerce. So they do not have, actually, sorry, my mistake. BC, they have brick and mortar stores. So BC government has brick and mortar stores. Alberta government does not. Ontario, the government did have a plan for it, and then the administration changed, and the new administration said that they weren't going to operate brick and mortar stores. Quebec, I believe, is all government stores. Now with the e-commerce, I know that Ontario, BC, and Alberta, the government, they are the only ones that can have the e-commerce website. So if you own a retail dispensary in either of those major provinces, you cannot run an online e-commerce website where you ship direct to consumers. In Saskatchewan, you can.
So is that probably going to eventually be a preferred model where everything is just available online? I mean, I don't. How did I know there's this company, Weed Maps? They're kind of like the Yelp of
Yeah.
marijuana. Is that something that you would participate in, or is it different because you're just sending it to either the government or the wholesalers?
Yeah, so right now, we only ship to the government or the retail stores. Now, you know, if the model would ever allow for us to ship our product directly to consumers across the country, that would be phenomenal in my opinion. Like as a licensed producer, I'd love to be able to ship directly to consumers, but I don't see that happening anytime in the near future because you have the provincial governments that want to collect their margin uh, with their distribution.
That makes sense. The total revenue that you had, how much of this was government compared to wholesale? And in 2020, you were at 8.8 mil Canadian dollars. Yeah, what's how much is the government taking in this?
So you mean excise tax?
No, the just your total revenue. Like, are you sending 50% to the government and 50% to the wholesalers? Where is it all going?
Yeah, I think we sent like 79% of our product to the rec supply chain, and then the rest was
And
wholesale. So when rec
Rex,
supply chain, that would be, I don't have the breakdown between how much went to Ontario and BC, which is government controlled, versus how much went to Saskatchewan. So I
gotcha.
only know the numbers of like rec versus wholesale.
And so rec is that government supply chain, and that you think was about 7. Okay, okay.
Correct, but
So
also in a province like Saskatchewan, it's not government. So rec is all, anything this is rec to me. It doesn't matter which province. Each province has their own regulations and different supply chains.
okay. So of that 79%, it sounds like only one of the provinces doesn't go through the government model, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so I mean, and I know you don't know the exact breakdown, but that's probably that could be in theory like a fifth or a sixth or whatever of that isn't going through the government.
Yeah, I'd say a little bit less because it is a smaller province. BC and Ontario are much larger provinces, and those are the ones that go
Uh,
through the government. You still have to pay a tax to the government in selling to Saskatchewan. They're just not the
yeah.
broker and the middleman. So they still they
Gotcha.
still they still clip a fee without having to touch a product, which is pretty
Brilliant.
smart in my opinion. Yeah, it's kind of like the Nevada model. Nevada's like that too. The government doesn't touch the product. You sell to whoever. They send you a tax bill. Simple.
Yeah, in America, it's just it seems odd just comparing the American models to, let's say, Canada. Is oftentimes I think of Canada as so similar, but even just the way they do the beer distribution through government stores and now through this rec model, it seems like the vast majority, with the exception of the one province, is going through the government. The government's essentially in the business of creating their own distribution monopoly in these particular areas. Is that a risk to you? I mean, what if they say, hey, we've got 10 new custom cultivators or craft cultivators here, we want to give them an allocation too?
Yeah, so that's a risk every day as a licensed producer. So Ontario did a product delisting at the end of January, and I don't know the exact numbers. We didn't get any delistings. I was told by somebody that we were the only publicly traded company that did not receive any products that got a delisting notification. I don't know if that's true or not, but I know that every major licensed producer had products delisted. And if you go on ocs.ca and you look at their last call, there's a last call section. Those are all the
Yeah.
products that have been delisted, and you will not see anything with Black Market or Tenzo on there. Now, you have a valid point. There are, government run supply chains. I think that if it ain't broke, why
Yeah.
fix it? So if we have core SKUs that's making the government, a decent amount of margin on a quarterly basis, why would they look to push us out for a newcomer? Now, I know for a fact that getting provincial listings right now is more difficult. I'm hearing that from the new licensed producers that are coming online.
So this is this Ontario cannabis store. So this is literally run by the government in
Correct.
Ontario. I mean, it actually looks like a good website. I mean, this doesn't look anything like the DMV in America, for example.
Yeah, yeah.
So where's this delistings?
So if you
said
search,
last call.
search last call, there should be a category in there.
All right. Let's see here. Or okay, let's see more. Last. Either way, I can play around with this later and try.
Yeah.
But so in other words, your products might show up here as just, oh, okay, here they sell rolling paper, they sell a drink with THC in it, and so your products would show up in this store.
Correct. If you actually search black market, BLK space MKT, you'll be able to come up to our products: Cherry Punch, Peanut Butter Mac.
Oh, yeah. Their search is, oh, there we go. Now there's the search. Okay,
Yeah.
BLK. I'll just try BLK.
MKT. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Like a cherry punch. I see.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, like this.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so here's a product essentially that you're selling in either 3.5 or 7 grams, and it sells for around 15 Canadian dollars a gram essentially. And so somebody buys this, you're not the one who's getting the order. This is their markup, so you're not getting that pricing.
Correct. We've already loaded their warehouse. That product's sitting in their warehouse, just like how liquor would be, right?
That is interesting. So okay. So they're in charge of all of really the marketing of it. You're not trying to figure out how to market this product at all. Well, it doesn't matter.
Yes, I do, because being listed on Amazon, for example, doesn't mean squat if nobody knows your product and if nobody's looking for your product, right?
Good so
being on OCS's website, and let alone the retail stores. There are, last I checked, there's like 500 retail stores in Ontario. And there's all private retail stores. So we need penetration into each and every single retail store. Just being on that eBay or Amazon doesn't mean nothing. So we have to target the stores. We have to communicate, send them swag, send them displays, talk to them about why they should carry our product. The good thing is that it's not an uphill battle for us. If it's, if you're selling the same stuff that everybody else has, mid-grade product at a mid-grade price point, why would the retailer want to carry you, right? If you're another Budweiser, like, they get enough people knocking on their door. When you're a craft, like you'll see right this little Hennessy right there. If you're like the Hennessy equivalent, then I think the liquor stores want to carry your product. So in terms of retail strategies, we don't really get pushback. A lot of stores are interested in hearing more if they're not already carrying our product, and so that's how we market. We communicate with the stores. We send, with COVID, we're not really sending reps in. We're more so engaging with them virtually, emails, calls, Instagram. Instagram seems to be great. Every store has an Instagram account. We're hitting them up. Hey, are you familiar with our products? And so we still got to market. That's only one thing. That's one. So getting it onto the store shelves, so getting it into the province is a huge win. But it's not time to start high-fiving yet. Then you got to go from the province into the store, which still is not a win. You get a store to buy your product. That's still not a win. Now you got to get the consumer to buy your product. Now, how does the consumer buy your product? Because it's all up to the bud tender, right? When you walk into call it a boutique. Like, I don't know if you have those out in the US, but in Canada, we call them like VQA wine stores. They're specialty wine stores that only carry wine, right? Only special wines. So you walk in there, there's like 500 different wines. And how are you going to know what to get? So it's all up to the bud tender for us to educate them. And that's with like product knowledge sessions. We tell them about our whole process, who we are, what we're doing. We're not a bunch of corporate suits looking to do, a pump and dump stock. We're young entrepreneurs. We care about the product. Here's our process, whole plant hang dry, hand trim, hand package. Now it's all up to the bud tender to be able to sell the product to the right consumer. And it's not for every consumer, right? Some guy might walk in and say, hey, I want some edibles. We're not going to say, hey, buy black market flower, right? That's the wrong approach. So if somebody says, I want to get a top shelf flower, I want high THC, I want to spend some money here. And that's when someone might introduce the black market product. So there's a whole supply chain of steps and things that have to happen for us to get that sale. And then you get that first sale. Well, you know what? When the consumer opens the jar, they better like what they see, or else you're not going to get another purchase again. So, you know, when I hear companies high-fiving each other because they got a provincial listing, I'm like, guys, that's just part of it. That's like, I don't start high-fiving if I list my house for sale. My house is listed for sale. I'm not high-fiving. I'm not even high-fiving when I get an offer. I'm high-fiving when the money has hit the lawyer's account and the lawyer's paid me. That's when I high-five.
Good comparison. I mean, to me, it sounds like it in some ways, and this is, you know, no disrespect to obviously anybody in the business doing it, but it's because of government. It sounds terribly inefficient. You know, I mean, in my opinion, you should just be able to have your own Shopify website and you know, sell direct, right? Is this just the government? Because like you said, in Nevada, they just tax without touching it there. Is there a benefit to this provincial model? Is this just the government trying to take control because they want to make sure nobody under 19 buys this? Like, what's going on?
So when I look at the Saskatchewan model, as I said, like not all that glitters is gold. Saskatchewan model does have its flaws. As I said, people behave like bullies. What I would like to see, to be honest, is I'd like to be able to see, you know, like I think the major provinces, I think the way the supply chain is, I think it's okay. You know, I have no problem shipping to the government because they kind of keep the wolves at bay. They set the price. And a retailer can't call me and say, I want a discount, I want this, I want that, I want you to pay me 20 grand so I can carry your product on my shelves. So they don't get any of that.
Right.
But what I would like to see, and this is not a provincial government thing, it's a Health Canada, and I guess maybe it dovetails in the provincial, but I'd like to be able to see licensed producers ship product to consumers directly, and maybe there's a way that we can all coexist. So for example, if the government makes, you know, X percentage on my product by selling it to a retail store or selling it to their e-commerce, if I ship product to an Ontario resident, I still give the government their cut. So, and maybe it's a lesser cut because, hey, you don't have to handle $1 million of my inventory, unpackage it, keep track of it in your warehouse, all the logistics that are involved with it. So, you know, I'd like to see that model where, you know, if the government's typical margin, and I'm not really allowed to disclose it, but I'm going to use as an example, if the government's typical margin is 15%, I would love to see that I can sell my black market directly to an Ontario resident maybe and pay the government, you know, a 10% tax or something like that. I don't know. It would just be kind of cool to be able to engage with the consumer directly, know who our consumers are, know the demographic, know where they're living. Like, we don't know any of that. And, you know, we can get data from the stores, but it's really only like certain data we can get, like how much product we're moving in their store. Like, we have no idea the demographic.
What are you seeing in terms of these store reorders? I mean, the stores that are buying your product off the Ontario Cannabis Store, for example, off these, how many of the people buying from that, the small boutiques, how many of them are reordering?
So we don't really have too much visibility into that. And it all depends how the product sells. So here's an example, like, and I'll use BC as an example. So this used to be $49.99 for an eighth in BC. Now, when it was $49.99 from the BC government charges this online and in their stores. And probably most stores would charge a little bit more, like $52.99, which I think is reasonable. Now, I had a couple of retailers say, Norton, your product is not moving in my stores. I said, what are you priced at? Well, $75 for an eighth. I said, okay, you're 50% more than the government, who's your biggest competitor. Did you not think that might have something to do with it? So, you know, you can't please everybody. Like, well, we operate on, you know, we operate on a 60% gross margin, or else we're out of business. And I say, I'm not going to tell you how to run your store, but I believe that if you had it priced cheaper and you move more velocity, you know, might be a business model. So there are a couple stores that overprice products. For the most part, there's not that many. Those are the ones that usually complain that our product isn't moving, and they have stale data inventory. They bought products 6 months ago, and they wonder why it's not selling. When you can drive, you know, not even drive, you can walk like 3 blocks and buy somewhere else for, a lot cheaper.
Now, how much does do these rec recipients, so in other words, mostly the government that you're sending them this product to, how much are they keeping in inventory? I mean, for example, of this, $8.8 million in revenue of 2020, in theory, half of that could have not sold yet, right? I mean, maybe they bought this all, throughout the second half of the year, and it's still sitting there, right? Is that possible?
Possible, but what we see is we look at our package dates, right? So on, probably can't see. So this is something obviously old, right? Package on 2019, November 14th. So I kept this because this was actually our first launch into rec retail. So it's sitting in my wine cellar. So we listen, we send people into stores all the time, like our friends, go buy some product, let us know the pack date, right? And we're on the pack date. So we're seeing live pack dates, which are pretty current, like, a month or two ago. Also, the liquor boards now are moving towards, they can return your product if it doesn't sell within 3 months or 6 months. Wow. So now we got to play a game with the government now where we don't want to give them massive orders. So if they say, I want $1 million of product, well, that puts me at risk. If I sell you $1 million of product and it doesn't move, and you want to return, $750,000 of product to me in 6 months, who the hell is going to buy that? It's going to be stale. It's going to be, not as fresh as it would have been. I'd rather say, here's $400,000 of product, and then I give another province $200,000. So I kind of dribble it all out, and that way you got to keep it live and fresh. But provinces are getting smart now. They're not over ordering. They over ordered for a lot of licensed producers earlier in the year, and they're getting smarter. We've never had any product returned, but we did voluntarily, because we saw in a certain province, we could see the availability of wholesale, right? We saw there was product that was 5 months old. So we took it back and we swapped them out, but it wasn't much product. It was like $14,000 of product. And it really it came from my brother. So my brother said, I ordered one of these from the government website. What the hell? It's like 5 months old, bro. My older brother. I'm like, what? Yeah. Really? So I had my sales guy check the inventory. There was a little bit of product left. We said, listen, we're going to voluntarily take that back, because as a consumer that pays, $50 for a product, they're expecting fresh. And now my brother said the product was still good, but he's like, it doesn't give me that wow when I open the jar. So, we swapped it back out, and it was like 14,000 or maybe like 20,000 at the most. It wasn't anything huge, but that's the only time we did a voluntarily product swap.
I understand. Now the rec recipients, mostly the government, are they doing quality control, or are they kind of just like, the order came through, kind of similar to what you just described here? They just, hey, whatever, we're getting our tax, throw it in the box and send it out. How much does the government really care here?
Oh, so the government they audit our facility, they audit our processes, they audit our SOPs. They go through all that before you get a listing. So they put us through the ringer. That's step number one. Number two is, before they put in an order, they want to see the lab results. So we communicate. We say, listen, we just came down with 30 kilos of cherry punch. And they said, okay, we are interested in putting in an order for X dollars, subject to seeing your lab results. So they see the lab results, then if they like what they see, then they put in an order. And then once it arrives,
anyone?
Pardon me?
Go ahead.
No, please, you do. Go ahead.
Do they just list anyone? I mean, if you go through the licensing and you've got the lab results that show you have a legitimate product. I'm not exactly sure what they're looking for in the lab results. Maybe you can elaborate on that. But I mean, if I go to Canada right now and I go through the licensing and the regulatory, is it just if you go through these 10 steps, you will be listed on here?
No, not at all. Because what is your competitive advantage? What's your brand? What are you bringing different to the market that is not already offered out there, right? So
and they I mean, why would they care about that though? I mean, can't they just put everything on their website, and if it sells, great, and if it doesn't, it doesn't?
Well, to bring on a new producer, they have to have certain barcodes, they have to certain packaging, they have to understand how the supply chain works. The government doesn't want to work with somebody and get barcodes that don't scan, get case formats that are wrong, get product that's not what they said it was. Seeing a lab result is one thing, but you could tell the government, hey, I'm going to have product just like black market. I'm going to be 7 nugs. I'm going to be way cheaper. When it hits there, it could not be that. So the government, it's a lot of work for them to take on new product listings and product SKUs. You'll find in alcohol that they only do new product listings certain times of the year. It might be like once a quarter or once a year. That happens in alcohol. I think in cannabis, it's gonna get, not I think, I know for a fact, it's getting harder and harder for a new licensed producer to get SKUs listed. Now, I'm speaking of flower, right? Because there's, edibles and beverages. I think it's still an up and coming category. I think that if you have something unique, if you're like the equivalent of us in the edibles and beverages, like a craft process, unique, cool brands, I think it'd be pretty simple to get a listing. But I think another craft guy putting on flower, it's not that easy. And let alone, you need a different license from Health Canada. You need to get your standard processing license to package product to sell into the rec supply chain. Now, it's an arduous process to get that license. You need to have QA. You need to have the proper SOPs in place. So it's not as easy as just getting the cultivation license. So a lot of people, they get the cultivation license, then they go through somebody else that kind of acts as the middleman that has a standard processing license that will help get their product into the provincial shelves.
Now, what can you talk a little bit about the difference between this model and like dispensaries, for example? I see in the comments some folks talking about dispensaries. Where does that come in? What's the difference?
Well, in Ontario, there are dispensaries, right? There's 500 privately owned dispensaries. So we sell to the Ontario government into their massive warehouse. They then take product and put it on their online ocs.ca and also put product in the wholesale channel where retail dispensary owners or store purchasers can purchase our product.
Okay. Now, so you had mentioned that some goes to wholesale, some goes into the rec system. Does even the wholesale part go through the government also?
So as I mentioned, the wholesale could go anywhere. We sell product in large Ziploc bags. They could extract it. They could put it on their medical websites. They could export it. They could put it in their retail brands. What we try to do though is we try to get information from the wholesale producers, and sometimes we'll write things in the contracts where you can't put it into rec into these provinces, right? Because we don't want our product competing against ourselves. Now, why do we sell wholesale to begin with? There's a couple of reasons for that. So certain months we might have, all facilities harvesting at once and the provincial orders not be in line with that. What we'll do is we'll pick the lots that have the lowest THC content and look to sell those wholesale. Or we may get some harvest. So cherry punch needs to be like mid-20s THC, right? Sometimes we have crops that might not make the cut. Maybe it's 22%. And I'm like, well, I could put this I could get an order from Ontario for this. I know I could put it into the supply chain, but the question is, do I want to? Do I want to put 22% THC cherry punch into the Ontario market and risk a consumer? Consumers want high THC, and whether my personal opinion is that I think the product is just as equal in quality, terpene profile, the bag appeal, the nose, everything, the trichomes. But consumers want high THC, so I don't want somebody buying cherry punch expecting 25 and getting 22 and not being happy. So we'll sell wholesale to another licensed producer and put caveats. Okay, well, you can't use the name cherry punch. You can't go into Ontario. You can't go into BC. And sometimes they say, oh, it was going to go for medical anyways. I'm like, okay, cool. So we'll sell you the product. And I'd like to get away from selling product wholesale, but only if it means I'm not like, I'm okay selling product wholesale if it means I'm protecting my brand integrity, right? Because things happen. Sometimes you have a bad month, you have a bad crop. Like during COVID, like this March to June of last year, we couldn't travel. So meaning we could not go to our remote our facilities in Edmonton, Alberta, and Ontario. As a result, we had some harvests that were not up to par, at least to our standards. So that's why you see our wholesale sales went up in Q4, because we had harvests that were grown in Q2 and Q3. They still have to harvest it, lab tested, all the things before it's ready for sale. And we decided just to purge that inventory. So that affected our gross margin towards our final quarter. But moving forward, I'm confident that we're not going to have many of those lots. I mean, you may get the one-off here and there. And I'm hoping to be able to sell all of my product into the rec supply chain. You'll also see that we are in our subsequent events, we signed I gotta be careful how I word this. I think it was we said a global export deal. I think that's what the press release said. So I'm just trying to make sure I don't say anything that's not already publicly disclosed. That should get press released this coming week. It's interesting because it gives us an opportunity to participate in a market that we never thought we would be a part of. And I'm
and which market is this?
It's not disclosed, so I can't say.
Okay, I understand.
Yeah.
So that's an ambition of a craft grower, is to obviously sell this in as many countries as you can. That it doesn't sound like, and we're not going to guess, but you had mentioned earlier, US isn't something that's on the radar. So other countries you pick, and basically it's just more you can grow and more you could sell.
Yeah. So in this, it is a medical. It's a medical export deal. Okay. And yeah, we're excited about it. I think the long-term goal is I'd like to be a globally recognized brand. I think, Black Market Intenso should be in every single country that makes sense to be in. Right now, I shouldn't say every single country, but most major countries where it makes sense. If we can enter the market legally, if we can be competitive and at least establish meaningful market share, I'd like to see our brands across the country. By the same token, I don't want to empire build and dilute my expertise, dilute my team down by focusing on be a scroll, like chasing everything that you see, right? So very methodically and disciplined, analyzing everything. But yeah, the end goal would be to build brands across the world one day.
What's this difference between medical and selling into like the rec system for retail? Is there a better profit margin? You mentioned that when you wholesale, not so desirable, maybe lower THC. Hey, go use it in medical over there. Is medical like more of kind of a let's dump this off over here. It's a little cheaper. It's not the perfect. It's not going to be our branded product, and no problem. It sells that inventory. Or what's the difference between medical? Okay.
Not at all. So medical, you have a prescription, and we launched our e-commerce website early February. We're allowed to ship product directly to a medical patient without any government middleman. So we capture, if we get $10 a gram, we have to pay the $1 a gram excise tax to the government, the federal government, not the provincial. That's it. We keep everything else. So when you look at our average selling price in rec of $8.70 a gram, and then you see it's reselling for $15 a gram. I'm not going to say I want to be greedy and get $15 for my medical patients, but maybe there's an in between, right? Maybe I can get, 11, 12 bucks and I can net back $10 a gram, right? Or even at $10 a gram, I'm still netting back $9 a gram, which is, another avenue to put product into. And what I like is the medical is, it was a low capital investment. Like, we built a website, we hired one person to run it. If we have to scale up, we will scale up. But it could be very unique, because you think about, in Canada, I think a large a large percentage of the medical patients are what I call wellness patients, right? So they're not like chronic illness. And I think a lot of them are buying product medical, they're buying product recreational. And if we give them access to product that I can ship to their door, I can package on demand too. So it's fresh. Like, if we have a live harvest that's sitting in the vault that's, a week old, well, by the time it hits their doors, it's a 10-day old product, right? Not saying I'm going to be able to guarantee that every time. It all depends what's sitting in inventory. But and it allows us to engage with the consumer, right? Look at what their buying trends are, what they like to buy, ask them what they want to see. Hey, do you want to see pre-rolls? Like, it's so hard to communicate with our consumers in the rec side of things right now directly. It's not that easy. So, like we'll do stuff on social media and Instagram here and there, but we're not capturing, we don't know if this person is actually a consumer. But now let's say, we can go to our top 10 medical consumers on our website, or even top 100, and send an email blast. Hey, what kind of other products do you guys want to see? Did you like our new strain that we dropped, right? Like fill out surveys. So fill out surveys, and, like, there's a lot of more engaging, which I like. So no, it's to answer your question, it's not just dumping, like shrapnel into that market. Some producers might do that. For us, it's a chance to increase your gross margin and to engage with consumers.
79% going to rec. Then you got some going to wholesale. What's left for your own distribution channel there, direct to consumer through the medical, process? Few percent.
Well, for us, like we'll always have inventory, rolling inventory, right? So medical right now, we've just launched it. It's not something where I'm concerned about having supply for, because we always have product rolling that as we get orders, we just package and ship it out, Now, do I hope it reaches a point where I have to allocate, a tremendous amount of product? Heck yeah, I would love that, right? So, if and when that day comes, it would be great, because we capture all the gross margin.
Gotcha. Now, another thing that I was looking here on the last earnings disclosure, you've got a $2 million unrealized gain on changes in fair value of your plants. Had it not been for this, essentially, I'm assuming market value change here, your company, it would have still been generating a loss. Can you talk about these changes here in market value? Is it just ups and downs?
So somebody actually on Jeremy's video commented like, these guys are doing shady accounting. I actually messaged a guy on Instagram. I said, we are not doing shady accounting. This is IFRS standards. It is, I hate it. I don't like this fair value gain. So basically what they're saying is, like, depending on the lifespan of the plant, your biological assets, you have to record, a gain on it. Like you've made profit when you haven't realized it. So it's, again, I'm not a CPA. I understand the basic principles of it, and I don't actually like it. But as far as I'm concerned, there was no way around it. I hate that stuff. But yeah, essentially we have to record it on our books, IFRS standards, right? So it's kind of an absurd policy, in my opinion.
And what determines that? Just the market price of the actual plant, huh? It's kind of like Bitcoin. If it's up 1 month or down 1 month, huh?
The stage of the plant, where it is, also where it is into the post-harvest side of things. I'm not sure exactly, like, to the T how it's calculated, but I know from a high level perspective, the life cycle of the plant as it matures should have a value, right? So if you have a plant that might be like 3 weeks away from harvesting, then its value should reflect what it would be, 3 weeks away from harvesting. And I don't know what that is. Maybe it's 60% of your selling price. I don't know, but something along those lines.
I see. So how do you scale this? Because you've got half of your cost of goods sold going into salaries. You've got a lot of salaries then on operations. At what point does this become consistently profitable? Like how much can the government even take? Like, isn't there a limit? And have you reached that limit?
So we're seeing the government, they're opening new stores every week. Like Ontario opened like 100 something new stores in like a month. Ontario plans to have 800 stores by the end of the year. I'm not concerned about being able to sell all of our product into the rec supply chain because we're not even in Quebec yet or Alberta, which is two other major provinces, and we're working on that. Now, in terms of how to scale, so what's nice is that as we bring on more production capacity, which is this new 3PL joint venture, we don't have to really increase our corporate overhead. Like our corporate overhead is loaded to run a company that can sell 10,000 kilos on an annualized basis, right? Maybe a junior marketing guy, a junior sales guy, because right now we've done all this with a one-person sales team and a one-person marketing team. Like it's crazy. So yeah, my guys are begging me for some help for some juniors, and I'll probably give them that this year, or else they'll probably kill me. But at the corporate level, yeah, like we're staffed up to run with this capacity. In terms of the operations, I mean, it's pretty standard as facilities come online, we'll staff them, we'll scale up. We'll probably hit that $1.20 to $1.50 cash cost of production at the facility level. Now, what we do with our cash cost of production is no voodoo accounting. A lot of companies, they say roles that touch the plant. So roles that are involved with growing. So, if they have somebody come and, I don't know, like sanitize their driveway or something, I'm just pulling something. Somebody do the landscaping at the facility outside, right? Somebody that mows the lawn, they might not calculate that. Somebody that's in charge of IT, maybe they won't add that. We, at that facility, at Alberta Craft Cannabis, for example, every single thing, every single salary, every single expense at that facility gets captured into our cost of goods sold. So very honest accounting, in my opinion, versus some companies where like, well, we only do if it touches the plant. I'm like, and then they put it into their SG&A instead. So they end up with like an 85-cent cost of production. But I'm like, your SG&A is so bloated on a per gram basis. It's voodoo trickery, in my opinion, which I'm not a fan of.
Got it. So, I mean, can you scale this though without just like constantly having to add more people? I mean, people are hand trimming, hand hanging, hand everything. This product. It seems to me that they'll almost regularly have to align, with the exception of your corporate, right? Like the corporate salaries and wages you mentioned. For your COGS, you're linearly growing those two, right? The more you produce, the more people you have.
Correct. Yeah, there's no shortcut to doing things on I call it handcrafted cannabis. There's no shortcuts to it. So everything is going to be in scale. Like we could be 1 million square feet and we'd probably still, and maybe there's some cost savings. I'm sure, don't get me wrong, there's going to be some cost savings, but nothing that's going to drastically improve. Like, listen, like if you want to do something right, like you got to have the right people and the right team in place. Like we're not putting out mediocre product. We're putting out product that commands some of the highest selling prices in this country. And if you're going to do that, you got to do it right. There's no cutting corners.
Yeah. That makes sense. So really the big thing here in 2021 is bumping your top line, obviously. Have you released projections?
So we don't do forward guidance just because there's no benefit to anybody really. And it can become a disclosure nightmare with class action lawsuits and the whole plethora of things. Jeez. But what I like to do is this, listen, our existing facilities have the capacity to produce about 4 million grams a year, okay? Yeah. With the new facility coming online, which is, that will bring it to 10 million grams a year. We only own half of that facility. So if they're 6 million grams a year, if you're just to do the, what I call quick and dirty math, which is not how this would go in the financial statements, but if you just quick and dirty math, 6 million grams, we're half of that, that's 3 million grams. Our existing will be 4 million grams. The new facility will need time to scale up. So it's not like you turn on the lights and all of a sudden, boom, you're 6 million grams that first week, pro rata, bing, bang, boom, right? It doesn't work that way. But let's say when it gets to full capacity, when we get our existing facilities to full capacity, assuming we can, there might be some small operational challenges here and there. Like, for example, Alberta, we dropped one of our grow rooms to help with packaging. So, with those combined, GTEC should be 7 million grams of capacity a year. Do we produce all that and do we sell all that is, is the next question. And if somebody were to take those numbers and take an average selling price, they could probably do the math of what our potential would be, assuming we hit bing bang boom.
Right.
And if it makes sense, we're always looking at expansion. We have expansion capabilities at almost all of our facilities. We have expansion capabilities at all of our facilities. So if it makes sense, we'll expand. So that's where the scaling up is. That's where the upside is. As Canada brings more stores online, as the legal market grows its market share, we intend to fully, scale up. If we're selling all product, if we can't keep up with demand, we'll expand. We'll keep expanding to fill that demand. What I don't want to do is over expand, assuming that we're going to be able to move all that product, because that could ruin a company. Being late to bring on additional capacity is not going to ruin your company. If you have a 3% market share in a province, for example, and as that province scales up, you go down to 2% market share, but you're still selling the same volume. That means you're okay, because you're not selling less product. That means if you bring on more product, you can sell more product. So yes, you went from 3% market share to 2% market share, but that's because the market grew and you didn't grow with it. So I'd rather do that and grow with the market versus just saying, like, look at Aurora. Aurora's selling their Medicine Hat facility 1 million square feet. Like, I don't want to be doing that. Like, I got to scale up as it makes sense.
And that's is Aurora just got all this demand, or what makes a big company like that so unique?
Aurora is shutting down their facility. So they went They went too big, too fast with greenhouses, and now they're shutting them down.
Wow. Okay. Is there? Is the demand for cannabis and medical cannabis is it just straight up and to the right, or what are we seeing in terms of society and the demand for this?
I think, as a stock guy, the best way to put it for your perspective is that it's a steady climb. Like, you're seeing, provinces like Ontario grow their market share by, a high single digit or very low double digit per month. And I think that's a fair and steady, stable growth.
Yeah. So if you, for example, you had this capacity of producing 7 million grams, $8 a piece or whatever, you're not going to produce or produce all of it. That's not all going to work out. Say you got this in the future, $45 million dollars of revenue, essentially. How much on an example like that, how much in, say, 5 years or 3 years or whatever it is, would you actually expect to bring to the bottom line? Is it 7%, 10%, 15%? Just
so I'll use Q3 as an example. So Q3, we had an EBITDA margin of about 23%. I think as we scale up, that might be able to increase a little bit. But let's just say hypothetically, if I did $45 million of sales, cost of production, how many grams are you calculating that I'm selling there?
I did. I took 7 mil, but then I took off a chunk. I multiplied it by $8 for Canadian dollars, and then I just rounded down to 45. So instead of 56 in revenue, I rounded down to 45. So I took off about 20%.
Yeah, I would. I don't know how much would translate into bottom line, but I would say, you guys know our cost of goods sold. So it wouldn't be hard to calculate that. You know what our corporate burn is, and it wouldn't increase by much as we scale. So if our revenues go up 4x, our corporate burn doesn't go up 4x. Our corporate burn might go up, I don't know, a couple $100,000 a year, because I got to get my guys their helpers on the sales and marketing side before they kill me. Yeah. But other than that, I got to be careful about financial projections, right? So you guys have the numbers to do the math yourselves. If we hypothetically did $45 million in sales, the cost of goods sold, the corporate burn, it's not going to go up much on the corporate burn side.
Okay. So what's the future like in Canada? I mean, are they always going to be doing this government distribution model? And is that a risk, or for you, is this just, hey, we're par for the course on this? Like, we like that we can focus on growing and we can sell most of it to the government and let them deal with the rest.
I think the current system, it's not terrible. Like,
Okay.
some people complain about the government monopolies. I say, as I said, it's the grass isn't always greener. We play somewhere where it's not government controlled, and it's a wild west at times. So for us, like, we're a very agnostic company. Like, we're not huge and bureaucratic. So however the regulations change, like, we'll continue to like punch above our weight class. We'll continue to be innovative and tenacious. If regulations make it harder, like, we'll figure it out. Like, one of the things somebody always asks me is marketing. So they're like, how do you feel about Health Canada's restrictive marketing regs? I say, I love it. And that's because, no, sorry, I love it might not be the key word. People probably not like me for that. I would say that, it's kind of fair. It's fair game. So some of the companies like Canopy out there that have billions of dollars in the bank, they can't just throw money at marketing and outmarket us. Like, you got to find ways to be creative. So we were the first company in the country to put terpene profiles on our rec jars. Now, if you're not an avid cannabis consumer, that might not seem like a big deal to you, but the terpene profile is very important to a lot of consumers. And that's a way that we were able to do something that didn't cost us any money. It's not like, taking out Super Bowl ads. It's adding something onto the label. Now, if there was all this, if the marketing restrictions were a lot more relaxed, Canopy could take out their Super Bowl ads. I mean, our equivalent would be hockey, right? Stanley Cup ads, I guess. They take out the Stanley Cup ads, but or have their logo on the hockey rinks, like what you see Budweiser does. So
sure,
I'm a glass half full kind of guy. I gotta say, like, I'm a glass half full, and the regulations, nothing really scares me. Like, we'll find a way to get through it. We'll find a way to punch above our weight class. Like, we'll always find a way to make things work and be competitive and remain relevant.
So how do you, how does what you do, and I know you're working the flowers, do you ever consider getting into extracts or some of the other things that you can get into?
Yeah, we're looking at concentrates. I'd say, now when I say concentrates, it's a widely used term. Like, there's distillate, which is like, the Kirkland vodka of vape pens. And then there's things like live resin vape pens, which I think are pretty cool. There's a lot of other really unique concentrate products, which I won't get into, but we're a innovative, unique craft brand. And if we can find a third-party manufacturer that can produce products that will meet our specs and standards, then we will look at hiring them with using our flower and producing products for us. Now, I'm very careful not to be distracted, because when you're winning in a category or you're successful in a category, don't try and do too much. Like Nike's a winning brand. Like, what if Nike decided to start making cell phones one day? Like, maybe that's not the best comparison, right? But long story short, like, we don't want to be distracted. We have a small team, as I mentioned to you. If it makes sense and we find the right producer for the right price, like, we want to enter concentrates. We're not going to internalize it in the meantime. Our plan is to go through a third-party processor. We will make less margin because we have to, obviously pay them to produce these products. But if it turns out to be wildly successful, then we'll internalize. And here's an example. Pre-rolls, our first launch of pre-rolls. We didn't do it ourselves. We hired somebody else to do it. In the meantime of hiring somebody to do it, as we put the word out to the street that we had pre-rolls coming, we started realizing that there'd be pretty significant demand. So as we were going through this process with this other producer to make pre-rolls for us, we currently bought our own machine, because we're like, and normally the approach probably would have been get the pre-rolls first, get in the market, see how it goes, then buy a machine. But the demand that we were seeing from all the retail stores and the provincial buyers, like, holy crap, when you guys get pre-rolls, like, we'll be good for X dollars. And we started doing the math, and we're like, okay, let's go buy that pre-roll machine right now. So then we bought our own pre-roll machine, and now we've internalized it. Obviously, extractions is a lot more capital intensive than a pre-roll machine, but that's kind of the mindset that I have. Outsource to somebody else. If it doesn't work out and it's a fail, whatever, you probably made a little bit of margin on your product, or maybe worst case, you get product return from the government. You don't take a big hit on that, right? And then if it continues to be successful, then you run an analysis, like how many month payback is this, right? Like, do I internalize, bring in some of my contacts in the US? Like, I know guys that are putting out product that will decimate most of what the concentrates are out there in the Canadian market, right? I know guys in Cali or in Colorado that are putting out some serious fire, and I could pay these guys to help us build our internal extractions if it makes sense to. Sure. And again, it's a cost analysis there, right? If it's I can stop using XYZ, extraction code to produce my products, and it's a 6 to 12 month payback, sure, I'll do it. If I run the numbers and it's a 2-3 year payback, and I say, what, like, you guys keep producing it for us, like, we're happy.
Yeah, gotcha. How does this? I mean, it's obviously very different, but you've got a lot of growers out in Colombia as well, and they could just open air out there because of the weather. Are they getting big benefits, or are they not selling the flowers? Are they just doing the extracts? Or how different is this really?
So when GTEC was going public, I had a lot of bankers tell me, you gotta be careful. We're financing a lot of Latin America deals right now. Mm-hmm. So what? Like, well, they got the natural sun there, the low labor costs.
Yeah.
Does Porsche care how many cars Ford produces in a year? Probably not. Does Grey Goose care how much let's say Stoli produces in a year? So it's funny you bring that up. I believe the Latin American market will serve a purpose globally. Okay. Do I think people are going to grow product outdoor for like 10 cents a gram and decimate the Canadian market? I tell them this. I tell them, go try importing cherries first. Okay, so here's how things work in Canada. You have to prove the demand cannot be met domestically first. I forget the name of the body, right? So let's use cherries for an example. Like, lots of cherries are grown where I live. Like, if you think you can go import cherries from another country and wipe out all these local farmers and bankrupt them, it's not going to happen. You have to prove the demand cannot be met first, okay? Secondly, or if it's something unique, so Cuban cigars, like it's a unique thing. You can import Cuban cigars, Italian wines, even like certain like olive oil from Greece. Like these are things that are easy to import. Like guys that say Latin America is going to bankrupt, Canadian licensed producers is an absurd thing in my opinion. Because I say go try importing cherries first, let alone like a controlled substance. It's not going to happen. Now, here's what I see though. I see Colombia producing like inputs. So I see Colombia, let's say, making CBD isolate. Okay, they import the isolate to use as an ingredient for pharmaceutical, CPG, face creams, topicals and tinctures. I see that being a market, but do I see Colombia crushing black market's market share? No, not at all. That's not something that concerns me one bit.
Gotcha. Is this really like because of the shield of really, in this case, Canada's social government? I mean, if Canada, if let's say cannabis becomes much more legalized and broadens, do some of these barriers fall, and does the world cannabis market become less shielded, which could hurt?
I think so, but I think us being the first country to go for federal legalization, I think our government is always going to look out for its domestic market, right? Like, we got to watch out for our GDP. Like, why would you allow somebody to just decimate billions of dollars of capital that's been put into production, and potentially a $6 to $8 billion industry, right?
Right.
Again, I go back to like, go try importing cherries or bananas. Maybe not bananas.
Yeah.
Bananas aren't growing in Canada, but cherries are. So,
Sure.
I go back to that. I go back to that example.
Got it. So really, that becomes more of something for maybe international purposes. Like if you're trying to sell your product to Portugal, and Colombia is trying to sell to Portugal, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that could happen, but again, like we're operating on two different things, right? Like, does when Porsche tries to import cars to Australia, do they care how many cars Ford is importing? I don't think so.
Right. Gotcha. That makes sense. So it really comes down to that the craft nature of that, which I guess is one of the reasons you're also trying to really brand the product and market that product. Right now, with a lot of it going through to the government, are people becoming brand loyal, or I guess it's hard for us to know because we don't really have that sales data, huh?
Yeah, so it's funny enough. So I did a clubhouse thing like maybe like 3 weeks ago, and it was
Yeah.
primarily on Ontario retailers. So what I actually asked the Ontario retailers, I said, listen, like, you guys know black market, it's you guys are familiar with it. Now, let's just say I didn't have a cool glass jar, matte black. Let's say it came in a white Mylar bag and it was called Joe's Cannabis.
Okay.
Do you think I would have the success that I currently have? And the response was that for the most part right now, product speaks for itself. Now, whether someone's asking for Joe's Cannabis or black market, it's really just kind of a placeholder in the meantime, but people are starting to build loyalty to it now. So, if I put the same product in a, very generic packaging, would I still be successful? The answer is, I think, I from what I heard from the retailers,
Yeah.
I would still be successful. Would I be as
Wow.
successful as we are today? Probably not. So maybe the product is 80% of the race, and the branding and marketing is the final 20%, if I were just to make numbers up.
Okay. How much did the COVID crisis lead to maybe a temporary spike, or has it become a permanent spike?
Well, we saw COVID numbers, I think it was like April or May, it spiked.
Yeah.
And we were smart enough that there's an individual on my team. His name is David Lynn. He's the chief operating officer. He used to be senior VP marketing at Saputo. Used to be the former CEO of Sunripe, which is like a large juice company in Canada. He was smart enough to really pick it up, and he says, I think this is pantry loading. Let's not start high-fiving each other yet, because we were getting huge orders from the government. And I was like, entrepreneur, and he's like, yeah, this is awesome. Yeah, I'm calculating numbers.
Yeah.
This times 12 is holy. We can't keep up with demand, right? So he's like, yo. He's like, calm down. He didn't use the word yo. That's definitely not in his vocabulary. He was like, well, there, son, you need to, So he's like, it's pantry loading. I think let's not celebrate yet. And he was right. But what that did was it allowed, I think, during COVID, because cannabis sales went up. Again, it was pantry loading. It's like toilet paper sales went up, but the people wipe their butts more over COVID? No.
Right.
We started seeing it stabilize. But what started happening was something that, and this is what me hearing from the grapevine, there's no actual report or statistics. What started happening was people would pantry load personally cannabis, kind of like toilet paper at the time, right?
Yeah.
When you had too much toilet paper, I give them to my neighbors. When you have too much cannabis, you give them to your buddies. Some of those buddies might have never heard of black market. Some of those buddies might not have bought from the retail supply chain. So I started hearing from people like, oh yeah, like I don't know why stupid me bought like $600 of your product, but I gave some of it to some of my buddies and they've never heard of you guys before, and now they're buying your product. I'm like, wow. That's kind of cool. I never thought about that. I'm like, I gave my neighbors toilet paper, but they're maybe they're buying that brand now. I don't know.
That's fascinating. Yeah, and certainly these craft products are much less commoditized, I feel like, than toilet paper. I mean, I know there's like
For sure.
premium and like 2-ply, right? But I feel
Yeah.
like the canvas space, I mean, I mean, there are probably thousands of variants, and every single variant probably has some form of a difference and unique aspect to it. Like
Yeah.
alcohol, I think is the best comparison, huh?
I agree. Always use alcohol as a comparison.
Yeah. Now, is that COVID spike something that won't really hold through 2021? I mean, you're expanding,
Oh,
you're
I think
adding
we're done.
facilities.
I think we're done. The COVID spike was like a 2 month thing. So like I
Okay.
saw it spike, then I think it dropped a little bit, and then it just went on a steady climb, and it's surpassed where the COVID sales were.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Why did you partner on that next facility? Why not do your own? I mean, isn't that inconvenient to have a partner in the same building?
Well, let me tell you the deal first, and you tell me
Okay.
if I should have partnered with them. So we weren't
Okay.
looking for this, by the way. We weren't looking for this. We were busy on our own. These guys were investors in our company. They came to us and said, "Listen, we want to buy this building. We've been eyeing it. We'll buy the building. Okay. We'll put up the." And they asked us to put together a budget, quick and dirty. We're like, "Okay, yeah, it's going to be about a $10 million build out." So they said, "We'll buy the building. We'll put up the first 9 million. First nine
Wow.
million. You guys put up the final 1 million, and it's not even that we need the money; it's that we want you guys to have skin in the game because you have nothing to lose. Like, why would you give us the time of day? So you're the final $1 million, and then you're a 50-50 joint venture partnership. So, and it wasn't 50-50 in the beginning. Like they were trying to offer us a lot less, and I just basically just said not worth our time. Sorry, and that went on for.
Why would they do this? Why did they want? Is it because are they doing this because they're investors in the company? It's like, hey, let's set you up for some expansion, and we're gonna make our money back on growth in the company, or
I think it was like a triple whammy. They
okay.
wanted to buy the land and building. They wanted to deploy some capital into the sector. They also wanted their GTEC shares to pop up, and they wanted to collect some long-term cash flow. So, originally the deal was not 50-50. What they proposed, and I politely just declined. It's just not worth my time. You want me to be involved? We got to be equal partners, or you talk about me having skin in the game. Well, me having 30%, like I'm not going to get up out of bed to even care too much about that facility, right? That was
Right.
me
I see.
vacating.
Okay. I
So yeah, it ended up being 50-50, and I think it's a great deal for both parties, to be honest. Some people like to think those guys got an amazing deal. Some people like to think we got an amazing deal. There's two sides here, right? Like they brought capital to the table. When capital wasn't really available at that time, we didn't have to put it up ourselves. We didn't have to dilute. We didn't have to raise money. So, I think it's a fair deal for both sides, and I'm quite excited about the partnership. I'm quite excited about getting this facility licensed.
And is it the point of having gone public just to make it easier to do these partnerships, or is there a point where do just all of the cannabis companies in Canada go, let's go public?
Yeah, so I don't understand why some of these companies are currently public or even thinking about going public. I believe you go public for a couple of reasons, right? Maybe more than a couple, a few reasons, and they're not in any sort of order of importance. But shareholders want liquidity, you want access to capital, okay, and you want to use your stock as currency for M&A. So those are kind of the three primary reasons I see companies going public. Um, from my perspective, I think I needed to go public to access the capital at speed that I got it, and I need to go public to make the acquisitions that I made. Um, you know, I wouldn't say shareholder liquidity was a huge thing in the beginning. We just put up all the money ourselves. So, as you raise money, we did 2 rounds as a private company, obviously with the intent that we would go public. So we had to follow that path. It's simple, right? You tell people to put money in your company and that you're going to be public in the next year, and you got to follow that plan. Now, being where we are now, now we went public at $1.50 Canadian, by the way. So we closed at 98 cents. We've won as low as 6 cents at one point. I was always buying on the dips. Like good thing my wife doesn't know how to use SEDI. No, there's no money for diapers. No, times are tough at work. 500,000 shares. What was I saying?
Mergers and acquisitions.
Yeah, like, you know, being where we are now, obviously, with our share price, you know, it starts to, you know, it starts to look a little bit more attractive for us to do deals. Not saying that we're jumping at the bit at anything, but, you know, now it's, you know, looking at, do things make sense, right? Things are coming on our desk every day. Even when our stock was at an all-time low, things were coming on our desk. People wanted to do M&A, and I'm like, you want a $20 million valuation when I have twice the amount of revenue as you, and I'm a $15 million market cap. So, you know, I think, you know, it's going to be an interesting year for us. I think this will be the best year to date for the company in terms of everything, like performance, execution, excitement, news. I'm quite excited about this year.
That is exciting. You know, is there? I mean, how many shares do you guys have float? I'm sure I could look here. I know you've got around 134 million shares. How many of these are actually on the market?
So actually, we have about 143 million shares. That is outdated. On the market, I believe on the 3-year anniversary from when we went public, there will be a lot of stock that's coming free trading. And that is predominantly my stock and some of the other founders. So when we went public, we locked up our stock for 3 years. We get 1/6 every 6 months, and the final tranche comes in June. But yeah, for the most part, I think there's probably, you know, 85 to 90% of that is out there free trading.
Okay, so how much is locking up in June or expiring in June?
Yeah, probably I think probably like 14-15 million, I think.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've had those numbers, because I signed the forms almost 3 years ago, so I don't know those numbers off the top of my head. Yeah, but we're not concerned. Sorry.
You can't sell a single share until June, in other words.
No, I can. I've received most of my stock. So we got 1/6 every 6 months, right? Over the course of 3 years. So June is my final 1/6 tranche. But I haven't sold a single share. I've just been buying.
Oh, fascinating. So, okay, I mean, really interesting. I mean, gosh, it just seems like the only thing that I think of is the competitiveness of the environment. But the more competitive it becomes, it seems like it's only becoming more competitive because the demand is rising. Would you agree with that?
Not really, actually. So the demand is rising. That's one thing, but it's being more competitive because there's a lot of small producers coming online that have product that, you know, is on par with us or potentially even better. The way I look at it is, like, if you have a 5,000 square foot facility, like, it's not that hard to put out the best product in the market, right? So what I say is that we try and produce the best product on a commercial scale that we can in Canada. And I'm not gonna lie, we're not the best product out there. There's product out there that is better than me. I've seen it. But, you know, they produce 1,000 kilos a year where we're going to be 10,000 kilos. So I see those people, those other licensed producers, as probably my biggest competition and threat, but they don't have the size and scale to actually really take a significant market share from me. Now, don't get me wrong, if 300 of these licensed producers came online with better product than me, I'd probably be like, okay, well, we gotta remain relevant here, guys. Like, you know, come up with a strategy that makes sense, that we can maintain our market share.
Yeah. Can you comment briefly on like the Tilrays and the Sundial? You know, these have gotten so much hype and attention.
To be honest, I don't know too much about these companies on, like, in depth, because the way I look at it is this: like, yes, they're in the same industry, and people ask me, well, they're in your same industry, you should be researching them like a hawk. I say no, because they're not our competition, right? The competition is the small producer that's putting out nicer product than me. You know, I'm researching him, like what their products, what their brands are, what their production capacities, what provinces they're in, like what the reviews are, because that's what matters. Like I don't care what Afria Soleil is doing, because that's doesn't compete with my product. So, but I unlike most people, I root for the big guys. I want Afria, Canopy, Tilray. I want all these guys to succeed. I want all of them to be successful. I want none of them to go bankrupt. I want them to start paying dividends, because you know why? Like the market cap moves in relative, right? So if Canopy is successful and they're trading at like, forward, 35 times, PE ratio or EBITDA or something like that, one would assume the rest of the industry would follow at least, maybe you won't get the metric as Canopy, but it'll bring us up too, is what I get at. So I'm always rooting for the big guys. I want them to win. I want them to succeed. They're not even competitors to me. We're playing different categories. Like I said, like they're the Fords of the world. And I don't think, it's relevant, but I want them to win, because in the capital markets perspective, it helps all of us.
Wow. Yeah, very, very insightful. Golly. Okay. So, I mean, I think I've pretty much hit all of my questions here. I mean, overall, it seems very exciting. Yeah. It seems like you're growing like crazy too. You've got these new facilities coming online. I gotta just like personally ask, how do you deal with all the employees? I mean, that's a lot, man.
We got 120 employees. So, I got a funny story for you actually, and it's kind of a long-winded thing to your question. So, I was actually never supposed to be the CEO of GTEC. So it's funny because we had some, I guess we had some assets that we owned privately. We were kind of the experts and the lead investors in this proposed craft roll-up strategy. So we were the money, we were the assets, we were the operations expertise. Now, the plan was to always put in a CEO in place, and I would remain, executive chairman, kind of behind the scenes operations guy. And funny enough, before GTEC, if you Googled me, nothing would come up. Nothing would come up other than I played in the World Series of Poker. It's literally, that'd be the only thing that came up. So, when we got to kind of push came to shove on the GTEC side, like, okay, well, my big investors said, Norton, we put money in. We knew the plan was that, you were the ops side behind the scenes. And you weren't going to be CEO, but seeing kind of the damage that you've done so far in a good way, the amount of capital that you've raised, and how you've kind of handled yourself, our thought is that you remain a CEO. And I'm like, well, I don't know anything about running a company of like 400 employees, right? Like I know how to build, manage, and operate cultivation facilities. I understand capital markets, because I've been a pretty big capital markets investor for a good chunk of my adult life. So we kind of split the baby. They said, listen, why don't you hire, like that right-hand man, the guy that understands how to run a big corporation. And that person was David Lim, who I mentioned to you, right? Sunright was about, yeah, exactly. So I got to say, like, big shout out to my team, my head of cultivation, David Buckle. He deals with a lot of these HR issues at the grow side. David Lynn, the chief operating officer, who handles a lot of the stuff that I don't want to handle. They bring stuff into my office and, like HR stuff, this guy has an issue with this. And I'm like, I literally just roll my eyes. I said, I don't want to touch that. Like, you guys figure it out. Like, somebody complained that their, butt was hurting because they were sitting and trimming and packaging all day, right? And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to touch that, guys. Like, what do you want me to do, right? So I'm very fortunate and blessed that I have a solid, capable team around me, people that are not afraid to wear multiple hats, people that are not afraid to get their hands dirty. And I'd say, I wouldn't say I'm the most valuable person in this company. Hands down. And I always say that I want to be the dumbest guy in a senior management meeting. When I walk into the boardroom, I want to be the dumbest guy. I want my head of cultivation to know way more than me about growing. I want my CFO to know way more about our cash position, finances than me. I want my chief operating officer to know way more about operations and the company more than me. So if I surround myself with a senior management team where I walk in and I'm literally the dumbest guy in the room, I think that's a win. And I don't mean that like, I don't know how to tie my shoes or anything like that, but I need subject matter experts that really know what they're talking about, and they should be smarter than me. My CFO should be smarter than me when it comes to accounting, right? So very fortunate to have a strong team and a very tenacious team, whatever it takes. Like our team, like most of my team, they're working on the weekends. Like my CFO's in the office on the weekends. My chief operating officer, if he doesn't have his kids, he's in the office. And I'm very fortunate, put it that way. I've also made some hires that weren't the best, and that comes with business, right? You're not going to nail everyone out the park, but how I handle. I know it was a long-winded answer, but how I handle everything is that I got an amazing team around me, and this is not a one-man show. This is not Team Nort. This is Team GTEC. And all these people, all the core people that I've been talking about, have been there since day one. Our marketing guy's been there since day one, head of cultivation, his senior grow team, all of his lieutenants under him that operate the grow facilities. David Lynn, chief operating officer, has been there. Kendra Blackford, like our CFO, they've all been there since day one. Funny enough, the only guy that hasn't been there since day one is our new head of sales, Kyle Marco. But he's been a friend of mine for about 10 years. He's worked at other LPs, worked at Aurora, and he recently moved to the Okanagan. So when he moved to the Okanagan, by timing worked out, our sales guy went on to Valens, who's another local Kelowna cannabis company, and Kyle started in December for us. So yeah, the core corporate team's been there since day one.
Jeez. Yeah, and I was just looking here. It looks like you're the largest shareholder, around what, 10.4% now? That's awesome. Awesome. Good for you. So there's another question here that comes up in the chat. Can you talk about, what is this, irradiation or something like what is that, and what does that have to do with your business?
Yeah, so there's two ways, irradiation and e-beaming. So irradiation basically treats the product for microbials. E-beam is another way that you treat product. People ask me that all the time. Sometimes we have to treat our product and sometimes we don't. Simple, but just keep in mind that product that has to get treated probably is subpar and probably isn't going to make the cut for our rec brands. Not that I'm guaranteeing that. So, but there's a whole culture about irradiation and e-beaming, and some people are advocates of it, and some people aren't. But at the end of the day, go to the grocery store, like your strawberries, your blackberries, all of that's been treated, all that's been sterilized.
Gotcha. Wow, this has been fascinating. I have to say thank you so much, first of all, for taking the time. I don't want to take up. Yeah, absolutely. I don't want to take up much more of your time here. I guess last question is, just United States legalization, good or bad?
I want to say effing phenomenal. Like I'm all for US legalizing, because that's the big barrier. Like US in the world is, kind of like a bully, but also like a leader. So I think a lot of countries are scared of legalization because of US. If US legalizes federally, like it's going to change the global landscape. Like we can be a global brand in every single country because I think most countries will legalize eventually. Do I think that I'm going to be able to export product into the US and like what these Colombia guys think, how they're going to kill Canada? No, I don't think so. But do I think I can, build facilities, buy a facility, do what I've done in Canada, purpose-built indoor facilities, high-end cultivars, unique cultivars, and put my product to market? Like, I would love that. As you can see, I'm a young guy. I'm 37. I'm not looking to retire. I'm not even looking to, like, my intention for this company isn't to just flip it to somebody, right? Like, obviously, as a byproduct of our success, if an offer makes sense, we'll look at that. But it drives me insane when I hear companies, well, look at, Afria bought Broken Coast, Aurora bought Whistler. Like, cool. Like, if that's your business model, like good luck, buddy. My thought is to build a real business. I still want to be sitting here in 10 years. I still want to be in this industry. I got a lot of years left in me, and if it makes sense to go into the US, and if my board will give me the okay and my bank and all that stuff, subject to legalization, then, we'd probably look at it.
That's amazing. Golly. Well, hey, thank you so much. I guess is there a way you can like shout out your product, or what do you want to shout out? Like, how do people get in touch with you? And
I mean, I'm pretty active on Twitter. That's the best way. You follow me on Twitter. My handle is at Nort604. You go on my Instagram. My handle is ns.gtec, GTEC, and then you'll see in my profile. It links Black Market Intenso. Follow us on Instagram. If you have any interest in the product, hit up the social media on those brands. And if you're a Canadian consumer, you can find us in BC, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and Yukon, and hopefully in the rest of the provinces soon.
Wow, super exciting, super incredible. Thank you so much for taking the time. Stand by for a moment, everybody. If you've enjoyed this, make sure to consider sharing the video, subscribe. The ticker symbol for this company is in the description and down below. I believe you probably won't be able to see it on Robinhood, but OTCs like, Fidelity, TD Ameritrade, you'll see those there. Thank you so very much for watching, and folks, we'll see you in the next one.